Today is November the 18th, 2021. My name is Tanya Finchum, and along with me is Ben Pollard. We are in Afton, Oklahoma, to speak with Grant Victor, and this will be part of our Oklahoma's Conservation Heritage Oral History Project. Grant was the recipient of the 2020 Oklahoma Leopold Conservation Award, fourth generation land steward for the Victor Ranch Farm and Ranch, and board member of the Ottawa County Conservation District and the Oklahoma Association of Conservation Districts. Got that right?
Yes, it is.
I'm with Oklahoma State University, and Ben is a retiree of the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. So thank you for letting us come today. This is a collaboration between the Oklahoma Conservation Historical Society, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And before we get into your conservation work, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Well, I'm a fourth generation, and I actually live in the original house that was built in 1891 when this was established, part of original Cherokee Indian allotment. And so I have three sons, and they're all in varying degrees work with me enough. They all have other jobs, but in varying degrees that they're all a part of our operation here. And I work with a cousin. It was my dad's brother's son, and so it's a battle somewhat to keep the heritage, to keeping everything together and going and all that. But it's a pride thing. My family, going all the way back to my grandfather, who was on the original conservation board in Ottawa County, J.Y. Victor. He was one of the first members, and so conservation has been a large part of my family. My dad was a VOAG teacher for years, and so from a young age, I learned a lot of lessons about the whys and how you do this and why you don't do that, and it was instilled in my life early on, the importance of the land. I turned this off. I promise you I did. Power off, power off. Oh, I didn't do that. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
And that was my son.
Okay.
Checking on his dad. So those principles were instilled in family, and some things can't be taught, and some things have to be recognized by seeing and doing over time. And I think that was the biggest part that makes my passion for conservation is sometimes we're not patient enough and we want things to happen quick, and things with our land, our water and other things, they take time to, it takes time for us to degrade them, and we don't notice so quick what we may be doing wrong, but also takes time to heal them back. And the greatest thing that was ever taught to me is Mother Nature is the greatest healer if you leave it alone. And it's funny that we talk about climate change now, because that was taught to me years ago, how it has always been and how it will always be. And perhaps now it's accelerated more and it's more of a thing known by people and that. But the important thing is you adapt, as a farmer and rancher. Farm programs change through, different political parties come in. I, as a farmer rancher, I have to learn to adapt. And the same way with our land out here, it adapts to changes, and we see the changes it's making. That years ago there was not any trees around this area. I've got pictures where they've done archaeological digs here, and they showed the guys in the pictures, and all there was tall prairie grass, and there were no trees. And so it's changed over the years, and so we adapt, animals adapt, and different things have to adapt. So what am I? I'm trying to be a small step in between to stay out of the extreme politics of one side or the other. I try to be someone that's practical in these things, and try to sell my story that we can make a difference, although sometimes we don't see those big changes. But it is so important that we have a plan. Mine is because I'm a fourth generation. I have sons that are interested. I have grandchildren that are interested. I don't know what it'd be like for me had I not had that. And I talk to some people and they'll say, my sad story is I've done this all along and I don't have anyone that wants to carry on. Well, so I'm really blessed with that. And so it's important to me. People ask me what my neighbors think of me by all the projects and things they're doing. And my answer to them is, what do they say to me, or what do they say when they're at the cafe talking about it? So to me, they'll say, well, it's interesting what you're doing. You know, I like to see you a little more and learn about it. And, you know, very polite. And I'm sure at the cafe, it's like, what the heck is he doing? You know, so it's different. And I have to be honest with you. Some days I wake up and say, you know, what the heck am I doing? But I know I'm doing the right thing. I know it's part of my faith too. Teaches me to respect the land, respect the animals, respect the environment. And I think that's a little bit what's carried through the generations that we've all been taught the importance of and the responsibility of stewardship. Mm-hmm. And so I try to be one that teaches by showing what I'm doing out here, not by what I say. Trust me, you do some of these things and they don't work, you know, and so you learn and you go back. But if your mind's right, so I don't look at myself as an extremist like a tree hugger, but I'm the one that lives it. You know, that's what I try to explain to the ones, you know, that might be from a different setting or whatever. And they'll talk about the importance of the environment and everything else and all that. And I say, oh, I get that. I live it. I'm out in it. And I watch the changes. And you're right, there are changes. But I said, there's got to be more doers. So I'm trying to teach the part of all of us being doers, mm-hmm. instead of pointing out who's wrong, whose fault, who's going to pay for it, things like that, and learn to do that. Now, with that being said, I can't do it alone. I seek out partnerships. And I think that's the answer for agriculture that I'm trying to teach now, is we talk about the new carbon mandates and things will come through and all this. And who better can do that than farmers and ranchers with the vast amount of land that we own and that. And so you're going to have industries that's going to have to go into the negative side on that, you know, doing things. Well, why can't we do a trade out with what we can provide and help us somewhat financially by helping them do the things that they're doing and all that. So no one desires, you know, the land and the water be taken care of more than us. That's our livelihood. Mm-hmm. We just all have a little different ways of getting there. I think everyone's goals are basically the same. It's just a matter of how we get there. I just think someone has to say, hey, let's go do it. Let's live it. That's the life you live. Because conservation isn't something you get up today and say, oh, today we're going to do conservation work. We'll do that. It's in everything you do. It's kind of like developing good safety habits. Mm-hmm. So they're ingrained in whether you're at the workplace or you're at your home or wherever you're at. You try to broaden your vision to think that way. And that's a lot about what I think about conservation. It's a lot of little things, and we learn from it, and we regress, and then we pick up and we go and we learn more in that. But that's me. That's my life. That's my vision, and that's what I'm doing. I don't have the answers. I don't have the intellect of a lot of people, but I try to live it and I try to practice it. So that's a little bit about myself.
Well, let's back up. What year were you born? 1957?
What was that?
What year were you born?
1956.
56. So you graduated from Afton High School?
Afton High School, 1975. I actually went 2 years to NEO-A&M. Came from a small in Miami, Oklahoma, mm-hmm. And then I went on to Oklahoma State University and graduated there with a bachelor's degrees in farm and ranch management and in economics, and that would have been 1979.
Okay. And were you involved with activities in particular while you were at Oklahoma?
Yes, I was. I'm trying to think. I was involved in also, like, I was not a pledge to any. Uh, I stayed on that, but I was friends with that, so I got the benefit of a lot of that.
Okay.
And farmhouse and AGR. My father had been an AGR, and I didn't go that route because I was actually rooming with my cousins, so that didn't work for me to be there. But I was friends with a lot of them, and the fun thing for me is when we'd have Ag Econ ward and all that. Sometimes they'd fight over would it be an AGR person or would it be a farmhouse person, and neither one won that. So they'd put me into some of those positions. So I had the benefit of being around a lot of very good people. I had nothing against sororities or fraternities or anything else. It wasn't a thing for me at that time. And but I benefited, and I saw a lot of benefits from it. So anyway, yeah, I was officers in Ag X Club and Ag Council. I was part of it, and since that time, after I've been out, one time I was president of the OSU Ag Alumni Group,
Okay.
and so I have in the past. I've been on that board, and I've been past president of it. So anyway, it's true to me. My three sons all attended Oklahoma State University, and I have a daughter-in-law that's a veterinarian from Oklahoma State University, and so the family lives on and goes, but met my wife at OSU, and so it's been a big part of my life, and so I tried to support the thing that took care of me for so many years.
What were your plans when you graduated? What did you plan to do?
What I'd wanted to do, I'd always thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to go into something of that nature because I knew from the days of hauling hay and square bells and all that, I would never in my life come back to Afton, Oklahoma, working farm. Okay, and then after probably about 2 months at school, I thought, man, I kind of miss that way of life. And then my dad and my father were partners after their father had passed away. And his younger brother died unexpectedly, 53 years age. And so that was my calling. I knew then that I was coming back home. And that's when I came back from my dad. And that's where I came back to start farming
And that was fine with your wife?
Pardon?
And it was fine with your wife?
It was because my wife was from western Oklahoma, halfway between Shattuck and Laverne, and her dad was a farmer.
So she knew that.
And she's a family of 4 other siblings, and I learned a lot of values going out there. One of my funniest things was the first time I went out there, they got all their water from a windmill, and not far from the kitchen was the bathroom. So they told me, well, I go in there and take a bath. So I go in there and I turn on the water, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll get this bathtub full. And I mean, I didn't have 6 inches in there, and all that, bam, bam, bam on the door. That's enough water. You don't need more of that. I'm like, what? So I learned my lessons about how they valued water so much more to me. And so it's kind of neat, the things that I saw there and saw back home, and the things that maybe perhaps I took for granted and things like that. But yeah, I found out that water was a precious resource to them out there, and that's a little different. So anyway, it's a strange thing. But then she moved back here. She graduated in 3.5 years, teacher, special ed teacher. She's on her 41st year of teaching special ed.
Wow.
She actually started at the Afton Public Schools, and then she moved from there to the VOTEC system. She still teaches in that capacity, similar to that, working with kids, helping them find different areas to go into and all that. And so after she got off of that, I got on the school board, and I spent 20 years on the school board because I couldn't be on the school board of her being there. But now I have two daughter-in-laws that are teachers, so I got off the school board, so my two daughter-in-laws can be teachers up there. So it's kind of a history around that. The family is always active in that, active church and active Farm Bureau. I'm not on the board anymore, but I've been involved in them and used to be president of Calvin Association and different things like that. So anyway, it's just a family deal. And
so you would have come back in the 70s?
Pardon?
You would have come back to the farm in the 70s?
Tough times.
In the 70s?
Tough times. There's a lot of times where, like, you know, we're going to have to sell land or we're going to have to do something. So it got down bare minimum. So you went a lot of years, you wasn't buying any machinery, and you went a lot of years, you wasn't keeping heifers back. So your, you know, cattle got older and your machinery got older and all that. And it was really tough. And I remember a lot of tough times. You know, I'd be really, really down thinking, man, how are we going to do it? And my dad could always, you know, kind of, hey, it's going to be all right. We're going to be all right. And then there'd be times when he'd be like, son, I don't know how we're going to do this. And I'd always say, oh, you know, we'll work through this and this is what we'll do. And actually things got a little bit better. And actually back in 1985 and through 86, my father and I did a lot of conservation work, and our first thing was on ponds. We had like 27 ponds at that time, and our biggest thing was on ponds. You'd build them square and deep, and with cattle going in and out of them, then all of a sudden you had a big old pond that wasn't very deep, and the quality of the water wasn't very good. So we started back in fencing off our ponds and running water tanks through there, and having concrete water tanks where they could drink. Worked really, really great. Some areas, you get out north town where it's flat, and it was hard to get a good waterfall to keep the sediment and everything out of the lines. But we did a whole lot of that, and we won an award locally in Ottawa County, and then went to one statewide, and then we actually won a national award, national endowment for soil and water conservation. I think DuPont sponsored that back in. We actually got to go to the White House, and I think Reagan was there then, and we got to do that for awards there. So I got to enjoy that with my father. Yeah. And I just found an old plaque in there while going. I thought, man, those are some good days. And I thought, man, I used to look a little bit different back then too. but that was really important to us. That was fun. And it was the first time is like, oh, you're being recognized for doing the right things, you see. Mm-hmm.
How would you learn to do those sort of things? How had you learned, or how did you know to do that?
My dad was very innovative about being, through his teaching and things like that. But I come back from college, and you know how it is when you come back to college, you're smarter than everyone, mm-hmm. right? And I always had all these ideas. And so I was always looking at it. Of course, you didn't have internet, that time to go back and do all those things. But I was always looking for different ideas. And so I'd studied, and I found, where they was making use of those tanks and all that. And a neat thing, we used to have several guys work for us, a little office down there, and Dad cooked for us at noon. And we'd come in, and I'll never forget, my brother-in-law had taken a picture of a big old Simmental bull we had, and he's standing out there. In the background was a tree, and behind that was this big, large pond that we have out in North Town. And I mean, it's been there forever, and we're there eating all that. I said, look at that. And they're like, that picture's been there forever. And I said, no. Look at that picture. And they said, what's wrong with that picture? I said, see the bull, see the tree? And they said, yeah. I said, where's the tree? Well, it's out there by the pond. I said, how close is the pond? Well, it looks like it's about 20 foot from the pond. I said, where's that tree at now? And they said, it's in the water. And I think that something simple as that opened up my mind as what that was. And that's back when we started all that, and when we started working all that. And it was a fun thing because we got to meet people all over the United States, because it started out, you went to a regional level, and then all these other, so you met people from Idaho and everything else. And what they do there may not be practical for what I do here, but it broadened my mind to thinking about those things. And I think that's the biggest thing that I hope I have learned to do was be more open-minded about things. Sometimes we're really set in our ways and we know what's best and we think that. And if you step out and you get around other people, and I always use the term make yourself feel a little uncomfortable, because it's not people that's going to agree with everything. We want to be around people that agree with us and make us feel good. And I've learned sometimes if you get away from that, bottom line is you're not going to totally agree, but there's going to be a lot of things you can both say, hey, yeah, I think so. So you find the common things that you agree with and you build off those things, and it kind of opens your horizon and lets you think a little more. And that's been really good for me, because I think at a time I was maybe not that way and I already knew what was best and that. And so that's helped me a lot, especially, when I first heard about the monarch deal and that, I'm like, okay, yeah, right. I'm driving down the road and they're in my fender on there and that. But then I think, oh, well, how big a part are they? Everything has a part. Because one day when I get up there, I'm going to ask, why did we have mosquitoes? I mean, everything has a good place, and why did we have ticks? I'm sure God has a good reason for all that, but I don't know what it was. But we do know all things are important in society and what we have and that, and we look at those things, and that's what I try to do. I try to be open-minded about that, and whatever I'm involved in, whether I'm being in a church deal, whatever capacity I am, I try to be that one in between. and I always tell my dad always taught me, try to be that person in between of bringing this group and this group together. And he said, when you've completed and you've been successful is that they're madder at you than they're madder at each other. And he says, work at that. And I laughed, I'm like, okay, yeah, right. And a lot of things that my father taught me nowadays, you see them in church and you have to feel here and that. So, I'll kind of step in between. So they're usually madder at me than the other. And I always laugh about it. I think that's what he always taught me. He always said, you're doing the right thing if you do that. And I think there's a lot of that out there for our environment talk and things like that. And
were you a middle child? I have to ask. Were you the middle child?
I have to ask, and that's and I think that's so important for us to do that and to be humble about it and not knowing, because I can be humbled fairly quickly and all that. And involved locally with a watershed program of Grand Lake of the Cherokees, and I'm the sole landowner that's involved in that. And it's really interesting, their takes and their ideas on things of what to do. And I think they've learned a lot from me, and I've certainly learned a lot from them of the importance of what we're doing. I fully realize that as a landowner and have water quality, things that come through here, the Horse Creek Park that comes into Grand Lake, and I fully realize that I'm at the top of the pyramid. If I mess up, I can affect a lot of people and a lot of wrong ways with that. So I think I take out a huge responsibility. And, so one of the neat things was 2 years ago when I started on the RCPP program of fencing off Horse Creek here and doing that area and the recognition from that, and I was able to receive the governor's award on water quality program through on that. And that, so what I did was when I went to that meeting, I wasn't around anyone like me, and it was probably good for me. My wife said, whoa, this is a little bit different, but I found a different perspective on everyone, and so the land isn't really about me. Do you know what I'm saying? You may own it, you may be taking care of it, but it's just passing on and all that. But it's a huge responsibility, and it's a fun responsibility. Isn't it though? I think about that. People say, "Oh my goodness, you must have this." And I said, "Man, this is what I love to do. I want to challenge. I want to think, what am I going out here and do?" And trust me, I do a lot of projects, and I look at them and say, "Well, that one didn't work," and you learn and you go back. But the funnest part of it is when I actually have someone come to me and they say, "Tell me why you're doing that and how you're doing that and what I'm doing. And the biggest thing that I try to teach everyone, just because it works for me, doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but this what works for me. And I try not to be overbearing about I have the right ideas of things, but I try to show them, and certainly by a lot of trial and error, and mainly a lot of error with it, but it's fun because that's my life, and that's what I wake up to do. And my wife's biggest thing is driving around, look where you planted clover or you planted a cover crop or you have soybeans or whatever. And end of the day, she gets home from work and we get in John Deere Gator and we're driving around. She said, we looked at these yesterday. And I said, yeah, and I'm going to go look at them again. And, so I'm pretty boring, that's my life, but that's what I enjoy. That's the passion that I have for that. But you can have a passion for it and not be on a pedestal or anything else. That you don't have to be the smartest one. And obviously, if it was, I wouldn't be worried with the things I have been. And it is sometimes a little embarrassing. Sometimes people ask me about, well, you won this award on conservation and all that and everything. Then you feel like you got everyone watching. You think, well, I better hope I'm doing everything right and all that. But if you can humbly express and show, so I can't explain the things that I'm trying to do as much as what I'm showing what I'm doing. And I think that's an important thing. I think a lot of us are all tired of people telling us how things to be done. And sometimes we just need to go about our business and show what works and what doesn't work. And so with the background of my father being an ag teacher, and one of the funniest things, I remember him, we'd drive up and we'd look at something there and he'd start telling me the story and he'd get a fourth of the way through and I said, Dad, you've told me this story 100 times. That was the teacher part of it. Well, nowadays it's my kids or even my grandkids. Papa, you've already told us this story about this. And so you find yourself getting in that mode. You wanting to teach and pass it on and all that. But that's okay. And that's all right. And I said, yeah, Papa, I'll probably tell it to you a couple hundred more times and all that. But I said, I want you to understand, the importance of it, because society will not value things anymore unless they're money or other things. And there's a lot of things in life far more important that don't deal directly with wealth and things like that. And if you don't instill in the young ones, because we're not taught that, by media or anything else. And so it's but through the line of what I do, like I spoke earlier, if I did not have my children to have it, I can't imagine what it'd be, because you're building this and you think, okay, next person's coming in, they're scratch it all and start all over. But to have, and I have talked to my kids and I say, are you really sure we're going to do this? Like we're planting a lot of pecan trees right now. One day that's should be a really good thing for them and my grandkids. And I hope one day it will be a deal where they don't have to have jobs off the farm to help support what they're doing. And merely that maybe it'll have enough income there. So,
it's a financial investment that you yourself won't see.
Exactly. And it's different. Who would have thought? You always think, well, it's always been cattle, it's always been grain. And each year I'm taking more and more of the farming ground out, put it into grass. And someone will say, oh, so you think cattle make a lot more money than the crops? And I say, well, no, not really. Some years one makes money and the other one loses money. And some year they both lose money. It's just a part of what it is. But a lot of times they do complement each other to an extent in what you can do. But my biggest thing is the machinery and all, and the products putting in and all that. Not that it's cheap for pastures and whatever, but it's just got ridiculous, and it's easier made. And guess what was here before all the other, before we were here? What was here? It was the grasslands. And so letting them heal and go back to that, I think is, I think that's what we try to do. We try to fool Mother Nature. We say, well, we can make something work here because it's been adapted to cooler or wetter climate or drier climate, and we're trying to figure all these things in. And sometimes it's better to let what happens here naturally and then assist it. And Now, certainly with, like I've spoke about the tight margin and everything else, and that we need to lean on those things, and we need to do the things that will naturally be more productive here than trying to make something that is not, because all the additive things that you have to bring into them are not going to be feasible anymore. And so, anyway, that's a little bit about me. I know I've drawn that, but it is a passion that I have. And getting back to the last part, I was talking about my father and doing all that. Now the biggest thing that I want to be, I've got about 238 acres in Riparian area. Okay, I can't have cattle there. I can't hay it. I can't graze it. And that's part of it where I am allowed to plant pecan trees and take care of them as needed. We put cover crops there. I've got all the goodies there. I'm trying to do the things there for monarchs and bees. But I'm through the biggest part of my pecan trees I have. I'm trying to get clover there, so I'd like to get bees started around there. And so I think that can be two things that could really complement each other. It's expensive, but it's a fun thing to do. But I mean, I'm putting money back into these riparian areas that I'm not going to, get things back out of. But the watching livestock and things came in. But the biggest thing to me of all this is I want that to be a teaching place. I want young people to be able to come in, old people to come in, people from different walks of life, cities and everything else in that. I want them to understand, what it is and what it can be when you let nature take back over. We think about a lot of these things and all that, but nature is the greatest healing thing that there is, but we got to allow it to do it. It won't go back and do what we want it to do. It'll go back and do what it's supposed to do. And that's a hard thing for us to accept sometimes. And so I want it to be a teaching thing. That's what I've talked with. I've partnershiped with GRDA. I think we're good partners. Little history goes back. Probably back in the 30s, a good part of our farming operation, our grazing operation, was what's in Grand Lake right now. And I know my great-grandfather and my grandfather fought with them and lost, and we lost a lot of our land there. And then you come back into the 60s, and there's major transmission lines come through our property here. Took out 100-year-old oak trees, pecan trees, and everything else. And I know my dad and my uncle fought vigorously to try to stop that, and they couldn't get it done. Well, I wish all those could see right now, because now GRDA and I are doing partnership, and it's great for me, and it's allowed me to go do things that, I'll be quite honest with you, I couldn't afford to do on my own to take us out. And so isn't it amazing what can do when we have a partnership? And I think that is the way of the future for farmers and ranchers. We're going to have to find partners to work with. And that's made all difference. Because I'll be honest with you, I could not have laid out that much land. And here in the near future, I'll be probably putting another 100 to 150 acres more into it. And so it's good for them. It's good for us. So it's kind of a neat thing to have when you have partnerships like that. And there's so many other people out there I think that we could have partnerships with. And I think that's as far as conservation work and all that, I think that's the answer to all that. Keep the government part out of it, where taxpayers not having to do it, and let us reach partnership. Now,
Grant, you might explain, if
yes.
you would, this partnership specifically with GRDA, how that works and what you're doing with that land that they're...
Yes.
Yeah, if you'll kind of give us a little more detail on that, that'd be great.
I had actually already gone in on a prior RCPP program and fenced off the creek to keep cattle out for the clarity of the water and things, because I am at the headwater right close to Grand Lake. And that program phased out after 5 years, and after 5 years, you put the cattle right back in, and never made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the government allowed me a lot of funds to be able to do that, on the fencing and all that. I put a lot of mine in there. I could not imagine after 5 years just regressing back and allowing the cattle to go back in. And so that's where I matched up. The Conservation Commission worked with me to find a partner, and we worked with them. And so what I actually have is a 30-year easement with Grand Lake, 30-year easement, and where they pay me to keep the cattle out there. Like I said, I can't graze it, I can't hay it. Now I do have to run cattle through different places to get from here to other, and they're really good to work with. So they've also allowed me to go in and plant pecan trees. So I've planted pecan orchards through the whole thing. And so now, in that effect, if I was just taking some of my regular pastures out and putting them in, that'd be expensive for me. So now I'm getting to do it on something that's not really, because I can't do it otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been really good partners. I've been helping them sell, and we're wanting to have a total of 1,000 to 2,000 acres through this whole Horse Creek watershed.
Okay.
And so I'm out there with them trying to do it, and we've brought new partners on board, and I think we're up to close 600 acres now. So so hopefully they'll do it, because if we're not all doing it, we're not going to see the whole result there and all that. Because basically what you're doing, and it's the hardest thing for me to explain to people in that, especially people might be in the city or whatever. No, I'm talking about, it's not necessarily pesticides, herbicides that's getting in that's causing the problem, but it's basically nutrients from fertilizer or whatever it may have. It may be from the cattle, maybe from manure, whatever it may be. And so what you're doing basically is that you're setting up a wide area along there that will be an area that will, you hope, consumes those nutrients before they get into there and that. And so it takes time to build that up and do that. But that's the whole thought on that part of it. And hopefully that, it's not bad things. It's things that I try to explain to people in the city that you're fertilizing your yard with, and, golf courses put on 10 times what farmer rancher, where there's a large amount going on there and that. But that's what it is. That's what the culprit is, and mainly the nitrates and the phosphates that pass on there on that. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, up and along the creek through here, well, my great-grandfather, my grandfather and all farmed that, you made all your terraces and everything, and guess where all the terraces and everything drained to? They drained to the creeks and the branches, and so they eventually made all down there. I mean, that's naturally what they did. And here on this operation over the years, probably 2/3 of the farming ground has already been converted back to grasses, and I'm trying to maybe do the rest of them. But it was set up for that, and back in there was no Grand Lake. There was a Grand River, and that's what I went to and all that, and so it's a pretty neat thing. There's a lot of neat story about this. The house that I live in here was built in 1891. A lot of this land around here, and I've been slowly trying to buy back from cousins and different ones to try to keep as much of it together as I can. And I know my dad and I always dreamed about that. And I remember in his last years, he had always said, "Son, don't worry about it. Don't carry that burden. If you can't do it, you can't do it." So that made me want to do it that much harder. And so through a lot of blessings, a lot of things, I've been able to do most all of it, kept most all of it together here. It's been at expense, but it's been a good thing. But a lot of neat things about this. If you notice, the road that comes by the place here makes a bad curve, and then it straightens up out there because the house was here before the road was here. And so we went that, and this is Ottawa County. Delaware County is actually 1 mile to the south. Okay, that's not the way it was written up. this should have been the Delaware County line right here with the house set on this side. My grandfather, my great grandfather, didn't want to ride his horse to Jay, Oklahoma, to Delaware County seat. So back then, I guess you get stuff like that done. So they got it changed to this is Ottawa County and line. So you talk about how things are, because he don't want to have to ride his horse there. He wanted to go to Miami instead of going to Jay. So it was just some neat history about things like that. And
So
nowadays,
what was the size of the original allotment that your family?
160 acres.
160.
But if you go back and look at old Indian maps and all that, like in this whole section, there's probably 500 or 600. I mean, they're broke down, a lot of them to 4 or 5. And so some of the deeds, especially if you go bring up an abstract, some of them were, you know, it's, so everyone thinks, well, everyone had a section here or whatever. No. It wasn't that at all. And so what happens, a lot of them, if they were a certain level of Cherokee, they couldn't sell their land. So a lot of them would lie about, no, I'm not that much Cherokee, so they sell their land. And so that's how a lot of it. So it's really interesting. And you know, and here we go, politics again and all that. I try to stay all that much up. We're talking about people having trouble with their heritage, you know, the tribe trying to go back and holding all that together. I get that. I don't know that I or someone else needs to be financially taken care of and all that, but it is you know, if it's ever going to be kept together, it is a huge responsibility, and most people would never have a chance to do it. I'm grateful for what I've been able to do. I wish I could do all of it. I can't. I won't be able to. But there's programs out there now that they're talking about having, you know, where they allow people to come in and to hold together historical things like that. So I'm hoping for some people to do.
Which side of the family was it? Your dad's side?
It's on my father's
your
side.
father's
Yes.
side. Cherokee too.
It's on my father's side. I'm actually Samuel Grant Victor Jr. My great-grandfather was Grant Victor. He was an orphan, raised by his brothers and sisters, okay? And then my grandfather was James Y. Victor, James Jurgen Victor, okay? And then my dad and my uncle, my dad was started back over with Samuel Grant Victor, okay? 3 first names. All right, and his brother was James Y. Victor Jr., okay, took after his dad. Well, then I'm Samuel Grant Victor Jr., and I have a son that's Samuel Grant Victor III, and he goes by Trey, and that's probably always going to stick with him. And we got an Aiden Grant. We didn't go on down the next generation of all that. That was kind of overbearing for all that part of that. But that was all my father's side.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I have 2 sisters. One's 8 and one 9 years older than myself.
So you're the baby of?
I'm the baby of the family. They both, one lives in Houston and the other one lives in Duncan. And so, yeah, so I'm you know, and living here with Mom and Dad and doing that. My dad was, I always remember when it happened, because we all know the crash when basketball players were all killed. It was just a week before that my dad was killed by a drunk driver doing that. So when we talk about that anniversary, that all comes back to me. And then all of a sudden one day I wake up and boom, here it is. And so my mother lived to be, she worked at the local bank uptown, walked to work. She worked there for 58 years.
Wow.
And walked 3 weeks to work and all that. Worked till she was 88, and they finally said, you need to retire. And after retired, she just slowly gone that. So she lived a few more years, and my wife and I took care of her the last 3 or 4 years, and don't regret it a bit. It was quite a thing. But anyway, so that's the family stay here. I have 2 of my sons live right here. One's an electrical engineer, and he works locally at Veneta. I have my middle son. He works for Crossland Construction. He's his wife is a veterinarian, and they were moving back here, but he's moved way up the deal, and he's in Tulsa now, and he's on some of their major hospital contracts. I'm afraid I'll never get to see him come back here. They're wanting to come back here and or open up a veterinary practice here, and I think one day that they will. And then my baby son is a physical therapist assistant, and so I still have them. They still work with me. They come by and in different capacities, and I respect each one of them. I want them, to live their lives and do the other, but I do ask them a lot of times. Okay, I'm indebting myself more doing all this the other. Is this really what you want? And they emphatically say, yes, Dad, that's what we want. So I hope one day to have a position to where they maybe don't have the sleepless nights and things that I have. And that's my desire. And, and I respected my dad for that, because my dad didn't have to fight too hard either. My dad was so strong about holding the farm together. So as my great-grandfather down to my grandfather and everything, when they would disperse land out, they would do it with undivided interest and the reasoning to do that. Now, for those parties that have zero interest in the farm, that was hard for them to understand. But had they not done that, there's no way it could have been. So it got down to cousins and that, and so I slowly bought out and then finally traded out a little bit of land here. The ones that say they'll always keep it in the Victor family will be fine. They have they're in their position as doctors and like that. So I feel very, very secure about it.
Yeah.
And so there's some other land around that's part of the family land that I don't own, that I would love one day to do that. But I guess I don't know. I guess you're never satisfied. But had my dad not fought hard to do that, then it wouldn't be there. And then him always encouraged me to not worry about it and not to do it, I think was my driving force, that I'm going to do this. And there's a lot of times I thought, I'm not going to be able to do it, I'm not going to be able to do it. And then things kind of turned around a little bit, and I have, and it's a pride thing, and you hope that your children, carry that same pride. And to do that, because I promise you, there's times that's about all that you can have. There's a huge encumbrance too, of keeping a place together and doing all that. And I just hope that I can have them in a position where it's not that, because I've spent a lot of nights thinking I don't know how I'm going to do this, and I'm encouraged by the awards I don't win. Some of them, I'll be honest with you, it's embarrassing. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I never award this, that, and the other, and all that. But it puts me in a position of a responsibility of selling that story. Do you know what I'm saying? If you'd ever read the book on Leopold, and you study that and his thoughts, you'd think he was way ahead of his time. He didn't think a whole lot about a lot of the government programs, a lot of things, and he and I thought a lot about the same, because he couldn't handle the waste part of it and everything, and that's a big thing with me. And I'll be honest with you. It doesn't make a lot of people happy when I feel that way, and I always tell them, don't ask my opinion, because I'll give it to you. And we just had our area meeting, OACD, the other day, and asked people to have questions after we'd have someone there, and we had a gentleman from Nature Conservancy, whatever that, and I had a lot of great presentation and talked about all the thing, but he kept coming back with little digs that, but people in Oklahoma don't understand. They think they don't know the difference between climate and weather, and then farmers don't understand. think they know this, but it's really this. But they're smart people and they're good people, and all. And he kept going through the whole thing, about that. And he had a lot. He had a lot. I thought he had a lot of really good points and everything else in that. But it was always a little more of a dig, and then I. So then the excavating question, no one did. So I raised my hand, and I know for certain people like Trey Lamb and Sarah, they probably like, oh my God, he's got the microphone. And but I just said, don't sell us short out here. You're talking about. I said we live it. We understand that. I said there is climate change. I said we recognize there's climate change, but I said I'm going to hurt your feelings. There's always been climate change. I watched through the '70s. I watched all the droughts through there, and I watched how things change. And yes, a lot of it is naturally occurring, but yeah, I think man contributes to part of it, and perhaps we've really accelerated it. But I said, coming out here pointing fingers on us, I said, that doesn't, and he, well, that's not really what I meant. And I said, no, but that's how it's construed. We can make the biggest difference of anyone. No one can make a bigger difference than what we can. But I said, come out here and tell us how we can partner with you in doing that. So since then, I think I kind of upset him. But since then, we're talking together. He's got a new job going to Washington, D.C. And so I'm working with them. I'm wanting to share ideas and do different things because, a lot of the think tanks are just think tanks to sit here and say what's best. And I know they do a lot of great things, and I've studied them more, and I'm what they've done a lot in the grasslands and everything else, and that's fantastic. But I try to explain to him a lot of that. There was a whole lot of money that was involved to be able to do those things, but you're coming out to farmers and ranchers that are, maybe trying to make a living or maybe trying to keep their homestead and everything together. Mm-hmm. And I said, asking them to change to do all that. But I said, please understand, with the people that's made a lot of great changes. And I said, I'm thrilled that they have, but they had the money to put into that. So what we're going to have to do with these people out here, with us, we got to come partnership. What can we contribute and how we can do it? So that was neat, and that's what I wanted to do. And first thing I did after that, I told Sarah, I said, I need to get a hold of these people. She goes, oh, okay, what are you going to do? I said, I want to talk to them. I want to work with them. So it's been really, really good. So she tied us all together, and we're talking about a lot of things. And I need to broaden my horizons, and I need to learn a little bit more about things. But I want them to understand that I think we can make the differences. I really think if you look at the vast amount of land that we control across the United States and all that, there's a real possibilities for us to do it. But we have to work together, and we got to have partnerships, and we got to work with that part of it and all that. So I guess no matter whether it's a school board or whether it's church or whether it's conservation or whether it's in politics or whatever, I cannot stand the pointing finger at whose fault it is and who should pay for it and why this happened and all that. I don't have time when I'm sitting with these things. I'm more result driven doing all those. And those things don't solve any problems. Okay? In fact, sometimes I think they deepen the wounds and make people more steadfast in what they are. And if we can just reach over and if we can all sit here and say, okay, we all have a common goal. Is that right? And we all do. Well, one route's here and another route's here. What can we find in between? And learn to understand that we're not going to walk out of here and agree on everything. And that's what we do. We're going to sit here till we all agree on everything. How is it going to happen? Some of us are raised different, some of us different backgrounds, different responsibilities, not doing. But we find a common area that we all think we can work on, and you move with it. And don't fight over those little things, And I think it's a loss. And I've seen that in schools. I've seen how it's held us back on things in schools. I see it in probably churches are some of the worst ones of that. And I see it all the time. Now, I'm not the perfect one of doing that. I'm learning. But that's the things that I'm trying to learn by and trying to be. I'm trying to be that person like I spoke about earlier. My dad said, let them all be mad at you and not at each other. And then you'll know you've accomplished something. And I think that's a good life lesson. I think that's a good life lesson. So that's what I strive to do, and I just want to be a leader.
Well, speaking about being a leader, I'm interested in having you tell us about Ottawa County Conservation District and what are the issues in your neck of the woods here, natural resource issues that you all are addressing these days.
The biggest thing that we have is there's a lot of composting. There's a lot of the litter issues and that, and keeping that's I'll be honest with you, it's a good product. It's a great product for farmers and ranchers. Okay, especially now fertilizer price went up. But there's places you can use it, and there's places we can't use it, and explain those and the handling of it, different things like that. We've worked really hard in our area with a lot of people that's with our thistles and some of our other things that we have. And I'm not saying we've eradicated, but man, you used to drive around, you just see them everywhere. And we've worked really hard on that. We've really worked hard on our water system. Now, we have real water systems out there, and some of my cattle deals are tied into a real water system. But I'm telling you, I'm afraid of the day when they have to cut us off and it's involved other people. I'm not trying to be alarmist or whatever. So, I'm trying to think of ways we do it. So we've really worked on a lot of water quality. That's probably some of the each year when we do it, you think, well, that's going to go away. It's not going to be a high-end deal, but it always seems to be. And so we're working with a lot of people on water quality issues and things like that. Our next biggest thing is we're going to see is what I've been talking about is the water runoff and what that's going to be, the programs there. Very big hesitancy with that because no one, I'll have people tell me that's big. Only complaint that anyone's personally came to me about on what I've done here on my program is now you open up every eye, so that's a problem. We got to fix it. And I said, it is a problem.
Yeah.
And, and I said, we're not directly, but indirectly we are affected. Well, now you're open up so those of us that don't do it, then on us. And I said, well, I guess he's correct about that part of it, and don't do it for that. But the Conservation District is working really hard. We're working with a lot of different people. My biggest goal within our district, I sat on a board with 4 of the guys that look like me. No, they're better looking than me and they're smarter than me, but we're all the same. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we go to a meeting and we all vote, yep. And I got to get out and get cattle. They got to go out and cut corn. They got to do it. And we do all those things and all that. And they're all wonderful. We need them there. But what we're trying to work on, and we have an outstanding secretary, Shirley, and working on, we're trying to get, I can never think of what the term is on it, but you can have a auxiliary type board.
Associate board member?
Exactly. Yeah. And so we have people I want people from different walks of life coming in that door, and we don't have them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And I've been working, I've been tasked to work on different things as far, and I know I'm dodging your question, but I promise you I'm coming back to it, on socially disadvantaged, that. And so I've been asked to work with people in Washington, D.C., and I've sat on my phone for hours talking to them, and they want to think in Oklahoma we're still hanging people and we're still shooting. And I mean, not that, but really, truly, they really think that's the way we handle all that. And so I have to explain to them, and of course I know I hurt some of their feelings because they're wanting to hear some really good stories. But this is what I'm trying to get to in this, and I'm sorry I'm slow about this, but we do not have people working, and I'm on the FSA board too, okay? So we don't have people in our offices there, the ladies or the guys that work there, or nor do we have in our conservation district people stand there and say, oh, there's a Native American I'm not going to help him, or this is an Afro-American, I'm not going to. We don't have people like that. I mean, I'd be shocked if we do at very many at all in that. And so I don't think that's being done, nor do I think people are purposely being secluded because of that, or because they're a female over a male, or because they're old, or whatever. I really don't think we have it. Where I do think that we have a problem is, in this day and time, everything's done over the internet and everything. When we had the COVID deal and everything, and then we had all those programs come out, I said over there in Miami, we wouldn't allow any of them go inside.
Mm-hmm.
And we had people in, and I know I'm talking FSA now, I apologize, but we had people come and see Delaware County as part of that. So that goes way down there south. And you have people come up there and they're telling, well, go online to do this and that. We're dealing with people, and a lot of them Native American. We're dealing with people that probably in their lifetime haven't had electricity their whole life. Okay, yeah. So and maybe dirt floors, something on that past. I'm sure we're all past a lot of that and everything else. But what happens? We don't discriminate against them directly. We don't have any employees in our offices, I feel, that like that. Don't feel that way, nor they do. Because there's a difference between saying, I don't do it, or I know I don't do it because it's not right. And I think most of our people believe it's not right, and that's why they don't do it. But the problem is, so how are we affecting people? Discriminating against people? That is a source we're doing it because they give up and they quit. Mm-hmm. And another little deal, a snippet that I throw about, so someone wants an FSA loan, you got to go to Veneta here, you go to Craig County, you go there, and you go in there and you sit down and you want to start something, and there's going to be a packet an inch thick to start going through. Okay? I've got a good banker. If I want to go through and get an FSA loan, I go to my banker, and they work it all out. I go in and sign the paper and do it. Okay? Not everyone has that. Mm-hmm. So these are how, and so you throw these other things down, or they look and they say, they give up and they quit. Mm-hmm. That's how we're discriminating. Not directly, but indirectly we are, and it's by that. And we cannot expect all these people, they'll say, well, we're going to try, to get internet service out to all the people. And that, hey, I'm going to tell you, when something gets really difficult on my computer, my kids or grandkids are the ones showing me how to do that. So you're not going to, maybe down the line, years from now will be, but we can't think. So it's not directly it's not directly socially disadvantaged as maybe someone that's elderly or whatever can't do that. But I think that's where we're doing. That's not what they really want to hear, but after I told the whole story, they say, hey, I get it. Yeah. I have the ability, and I have a banker. If I want to go do that, I have that do it. The ones that don't have that, mm-hmm. they're not going to get through all that. Mm-hmm. It ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. I promise you. Yeah. I've sat down and tried to feel it out. That's wrong. Now, is that anyone's fault sitting over in an office? Absolutely not. They'll do anything to work through them, but there are areas of doing that. That's why, going back over to Ottawa County District, that's why I want new people to start coming in our office. We have people that I can't even pronounce the names, okay? With chicken houses and everything, we got from different countries and all that are brilliant and a lot of ideas, and they have. I want more of them coming in our doors, okay? Also in Ottawa County, we've got the Quapaw tribe, the Miami tribe, the Ottawas, the Wyandotte tribe, you going down the line, there's like 8 or 9 of them. And these people are passionate about what they're doing. And a lot of them kind of work through some EPA projects, because some of them have their own, but we need them. And that's the people I want in our doors. That's the people I'm wanting to do. And then I'll feel like we're doing a job. And I told Shirley that. I said, I don't have anything against any of the guys on the board. I mean, they're all fantastic people. But, man, we need someone in there coming up with some wild-aired idea that we don't agree with, but somewhere in between, then, oh, wait a minute. Hey, I kind of get this and do it. And that's what we need. We need the farmers and ranchers are, we became dependent on so many government programs and all that, but our numbers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We better start reaching out and bringing other people into that,
Yeah.
or that will wither away and there won't be a need for it, because there's a need for them doing that. That is our challenge, and that's what we're trying to work on, and maybe bringing other people in there. I want to see other people. I want younger people coming in there. I want people of, you know, color. With we don't even really look at it differently that way. I mean, I'm part Cherokee, so I'm considered socially disadvantaged. That kind of like, well, I don't know, but I know some of them that probably really are. You understand what I'm saying? So there is a need for us to do that, because I don't. So that's an area that I'm trying to push hard on, that we start bringing new people in our doors.
Okay.
Well, the one thing you wanted to talk about, you haven't touched on much, is your soil health and Jimmy Emmons.
Well, the cover crops issue, that's in regenerative agriculture. I know that as I was winding down my career, suddenly soil health became really a new avenue, and I think that's really an exciting change of thinking, that we really look at the soil.
Soil health is mainly, and a greater example of it right now is fertilizer prices almost tripled, and so, you know, that's and the hardest thing for some people to understand is there are a lot of things that you can't, you know, you think, well, I can line my soil, I can fertilize, I can put chicken litter doing it. There are some things building up like our organic material and different things like that. That is not anything that we can go out there and throw out there at that. And that is, and if you have a deeper understanding of your fertility of your soils and your ability of doing that, if we don't build up and we don't have underneath that soil that we're not looking at, if we don't have a channel, because it's a massive, it's just like our bodies, you know, all the little veins and everything going all these different directions, they all do that. And when we deplete that soil of all those things, that we lose the ability to transfer. We can throw all those products in there, the nitrates, the phosphates, and all the other good things we want to do and all that, but they're not movable in your soil until you do that. So how do we open that up? I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and so what we have, and it's a tough issue around here on the cover crop deal, and I'll try to explain a little bit different. You get out west, and I know my father-in-law, you know, he'd have wheat and then he'd fallow it with something. You don't have all that. But basically, that's what he was doing. You see, he was protecting it from, you know, wind erosion, not so much from water, but from wind erosion. And we also knew, and we probably didn't understand back then, the importance of having something grow and those roots going down, and then the roots dying and open up that area and giving, you know, that soil's got to breathe too. And so all we could ever think of is mechanically, how can I make that all happen? And now we're understanding that how a cover crop. Okay, but the difference is, and why it's a little bit more difficult, and I can tell you my own guys in my conservation district are not very sold on that, is, but around here, you'll have a rotation, you'll have wheat, okay? And the common thing is you come right in behind it and you plant soybeans. Okay, so you come right in there and plant soybeans. Well, time you harvest soybeans, like I'm doing right now as we speak, and it's a little bit late, but you're doing that. That land, then you're going to transition next year to corn or grain sorghum or something else. Well, we're so late right now. See, I'm cutting beans right now. There aren't very many cover crops you can go out there and put, and then come back in and destroy it in February and start getting your ground ready to do corn. So our window doesn't make for what a lot of other places. So it's still a good deal. Now, if I'm not in a rotation like that and I've got a longer period, yeah, you know, if I just you know, jump from one crop to the other, it is the greatest thing, and some do it. But that is the hardest selling point. There's not a long enough window to get much growth. Like, you know, if I go out right now on this ground and I go out there and I try to plant my turnips and my radishes and everything else, they're not going to do anything. They need to be in earlier. Now, if I have corn ground and I'm not going to put it into wheat, like most of us do. You follow the wheat with the corn with wheat. That is a fantastic time to go do a cover crop, but 90% of the people are not doing that. So it doesn't kind of work. But what I have bought into and what has really helped me is my Bermuda meadows.
Yeah.
I'll do about, well, this year I did like 600 acres of cover crop because they're dormant. Okay. As of now, we just finally had a hard freeze. They're dormant. But what I have is a triticale, a barley and wheat, turnips, radishes. Oh goodness, Sudan. Now the Sudan's gone. It didn't get very tall and all that. But that's what I'm doing because if it works, if it does what we say it happens in our bare ground out there, it is no different in the other. And so that's what I'm doing on a lot of others and all that. Now I will tell you this, since I'm doing all in it, it's expensive. Still the right thing to do, but late spring I don't go and spray to kill it. I graze it. That's what I do. I'll in turn graze it, and I'll go do that. So we have to be a little more open-minded on our soil health while doing it. I'm doing the very same thing, but I'm doing it in a different capacity. And I still do it on some other ground, but you rarely have a window open enough to do it like we might even in Western Oklahoma doing all that.
That's a good explanation.
I know this is a selfish thing to say for you, but if I had an oil well then I hear if I have a big wind turbine out there, I might be able to say, okay, I'm going to skip a crop and I'm going to put a cover crop and it'd be better for that. But we're kind of in a corner that we can't do that. You understand? And there are programs out there where they'll pay to do it, but I promise you, for what it's costing to do all that. Now on December the 7th, I'll have a test deal that everyone's coming out to look at, and so I like doing those. I like having field days, and people can come and tell me what I'm doing wrong, or give me better, or they're nicer than that because there's a lot of neat people and all that. But that is my only thing I'll say on soil. Soil health is what we're all going to have to do because we can see what the inputs are doing and everything else, and how we can change that soil. And Jimmy Emmons is one of the greatest ones of showing what we can do about that. I just have a little different window over here, and it's a little bit different. So, but is there other capacities? So what I'm trying to show everyone that you can do it in a lot of other capacities here, because going in through that Bermuda meadow and with that drill going down in there is aerating that up through there, and you wouldn't believe the worms and the grub worms and everything else you see coming up from doing all that, and so that's area. What I try to tell everyone is you have to be a little innovative on that because it doesn't work the same for everybody.
Very good.
And if I could be somewhere where I could be and I could irrigate it, do everything else and all that, I would be jumping over it because there is what the soil health programs from the cover crops, what it does is not anything that we can do from anything man-made. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, that isn't anything that it's kind of like what I try to tell by grazing wheat. That's not a grain that I could go buy. What those cattle or something are getting by that. In the same capacity, I'm trying to explain through the soil health program what we can do for our soil. There isn't any type of tillage. There's not any type of additive of fertilizer or anything else that we can do that can do for the soil what by having the cover crop and what it does. We always look at the big thing. Now it's all the little things and they're making all the difference. And it's going to have to be the way of the future in capacity. It's going to change. I just wish it worked a little bit more for us on windows here. But that is the hardest selling deal here. And so my biggest thing is trying to sell to people then how good it is to do it in dormant meadows. And they're like, well, that's not the same thing. You're not doing it in cropland. Well, grass is my biggest crop. I just farm, about 1,000 acres, but run 7 800 mama cows and everything, my grass is really the biggest crop that I deal with and all that. And so what I do to that and planting legumes back in and do everything, and that's kind of hard to do, especially if you're spraying, trying to keep out, then you have to watch what you're doing with those things. So anyway, soil health is the answer to what we're all going to have to do. It's just different capacities and different adaptability for different people.
Yeah.
And that is a big one where you say, that may not work here like it works somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that.
Yeah.
And so I'm afraid what we have as people is say, well, it doesn't work. It's not practical. Well, one day when our soil is depleted and we can't use it for anything else, we're probably going to be thinking then what was practical and what wasn't. And that's the thing we have to look at. So that's a big one for me. I'm on board with it, and I love it. I just have to sell it in a different capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of winter peas out in it this year, watching them grow, and already they're not any taller than that. But when you go dig down, they're already way down here. So that's a neat thing.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson for all of us.
Yeah.
And the best thing you do is say, if I left alone, what would happen? And that's what would happen. New things would come in
Mm-hmm.
on their own.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened to the areas that has their riparian or OOHRP that you've done along the stream? What difference has it made this?
Yeah. What I've noticed is amazingly, and not in huge areas, but you're seeing native stuff come back in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest thing for me. And I've tried planting some more of the native grass, and that's a difficult thing to get started and do without just totally eradicating everything else there. And I can't do that. So I've got away from that. I'm trying things like orchard grasses and other things there that might be a little more adaptable than trying to bring in my native grasses. But I'm also going in with a lot of legumes and different things. And people laugh at, they're calling us saying, what in the world is that growing down there? Well, we're in my riparian area where I have all my pecan trees, you've probably seen a lot of places when they're young trees, you have a strip sprayed that all up and down through there along the trees, so they don't have competition. You wouldn't think grass would be competition for a tree, but if you plant a bare root tree, it can't have the other competition. So that is the biggest thing that they'll teach me that I'm having to learn about pecan trees is you cannot have competition starting out. If it's a potted tree and you put it in there, it wouldn't be a problem. So you can't have grass anywhere else. So you have a strip, say 4 foot wide, and so you do it out there. So I went back through there this year, and of course I planted a lot of I think about like 5 different types of clovers and all that because I enjoy messing with that part of it. But I planted, turnips and radishes and all those other things. And it's just brilliant green all up and down, all through there and all that. Watching all those turnips grow and all that. Now, what practicality that is as a cover crop to there, I probably can't explain that part of it. But I think anything growing there is better than the other part there. But I get a lot of people stopping and ask me, what in the world is that? I said, well, that's turnips and radishes growing out there and all that. So yeah, it is what it is. Yeah. But I just think that anything that you can keep, it goes back to that philosophy of a cover crop, the importance of what it does. So what it's done along there by doing that is it really brought the wildlife back in through there. And I'd love to get the quail back in there. And that's the whole reason I was trying to get the native going. So when I couldn't get the native like I wanted, you don't want your fescues and you don't want your Bermuda grass. So here I am going in there spraying and killing fescue and Bermuda grass out there because it's not good for the quail habitat. So the neat thing, when you're doing the right thing for your soil and do it for everything else, you're probably doing the right thing for wildlife. Mm-hmm. Your monarchs and everything. So all the things I'm trying to do for it. So it hadn't came back as quick as I wanted. I'm hoping to have, it's around creek areas. So I'm hoping to bring turkeys and that back in. They used to be around here for a few years after they started them, but I don't see them anymore. So I'd like to get that started a bit. Mm-hmm. But certainly the deer and every little wildlife creature you can think of, you just you just see a lot more of them what there was. So that's what I'm wanting, and it's amazing to me. When I first started this, I thought, well, over time, and will I be able to in my lifetime be able to see the difference and all that? It's amazing, the differences, and not the things that I put back into it, but just the things that came back in there. Up and down the creek, watching how they're going through there, and the creeks and the branches around here are. When you have heavy rains, of course, they're flowing out of the banks and they're going on. But mainly it's a water hole here and then a shallow and a crossing, a water crossing here and all that. But as we have these bigger rains, it's washed through there a lot. So after the rains are gone, the water's ran, there's not much water maintains or stays in them, okay? We've lost a lot of our pockets of water where it's like this and then it washes them out, so we're losing all that. So I know I look silly and all that, but your bags of ready mixed concrete, I can't do anything over 2 foot and change the creeks, or I have to go through the Corps of Engineers and all that. So what I've gone along up and down the creek and all that, you get a bunch of those bags of the concrete and just go stack them up on each other and make a semi-dam. So I've done that. So now I got all my water pockets back in there, because once they get wet, they turn into concrete right there, and it's $2 a bag when you buy them in bulk and do that. I couldn't go build anything doing all, and they leak, so I'm still allowing water to go through and all that. So it's been fun. So now I've got a total habitat there for the water, and because a lot of times those branches would go dry, and now they don't go dry anymore because they're able to hold water there now. But it's really neat to see the different habitat, and probably a lot of them that you don't like seeing, the possums, the raccoons, and everything else. But nighttime, it's quite a delight to see the animals that's down there and all that. And
any feral hogs?
Pardon?
Any feral hogs?
Yes.
Or wild hogs, whatever.
We had a lot of them here. And they're not as abundant as they've been. But I mean, they got bad. They would tear up my wheat fields and everything else. And they'd go wherever. And one of the craziest things, you could be on a combine watching them, and you'd see about 10 generations, from the great big ones to go inside, and then there'd be little piglets on the end. They'd just be running through there and that. And you try to get up on them, and they're basically blind. I mean, they can't see from me to you hardly. But their scent is out of this world. They're about like a grizzly bear. They can smell from a long, long ways off and all that. And you try to go get them, and they know how to run the creeks. They get down to the creek. But, boy, there have been some terrible car wrecks out here when you have, my boys have shot some that weighed 300, 400-pound hogs out here and all that. And but they run out in front of a small car. I mean, that's far worse than any deer that ever went out there. So... Wow. So, but I don't have them right now. I don't have the feral hogs like I used to. So I don't know. And that's good, because that's not a wildlife I want to come in. We've started over the last 10, 15 years starting to see bald eagles and the brown eagles start coming back in here. You see them around here. But for the first time in that Riparian area, I'm watching them build nests and actually raise young ones. And that had never happened before. So that's kind of a neat thing. So, I mean, if you don't see value in some of those other things and all that, then you're questioning sometimes of what you're doing there and that. But we have rains here, and it'll shoot across and do it. So I'm trying to get areas built up where you don't have washing on that, because, I mean, it can do a lot of damage just one little flood and all that. And it looks like perhaps, what we're going through now in the transition in our climate now, we're going to have more of those. So we're going to have those 5-7 inch rains. And that's what happens here. It gets out of its bank, and tomorrow it's back down, but then your fences are gone and everything else and all that. So you can't change that, but you adapt to it, and that's kind of what I did. But the riparian is my favorite thing. I'll go down there and sit down there and just want to watch things. You'll see new plants you've never seen before and things, and I'm trying to add to it, but I can't begin to do to it what it will do to itself. And that's that's a great lesson to me.
Yeah.
That's a great lesson to me, and that we all need to look out there on that. So, but
That's your favorite place your favorite spot on your property?
yeah, it runs all through. I have to show you a map. It runs through all the branches and creeks down through here and all that. And I'll just pull down there and have peace of mind to sit down there sometime and watch things on that. But yes, I mean, because I'm looking over there, and this year got pretty dry during the summer, so my pastures got down pretty short like that. But I'm over in that riparian area, and the grasses are about like that. It just shows you, what it can do there and that. And it tells me what I'd be doing if I didn't have it fenced and my cattle were there. They would have it all laid down. They'd be down in the creek and doing that. But nature has a great way of filtering and doing a lot of things. And so we all got to learn how to live together and work together and all that. Yeah. And so I've learned that some places I need to widen the area, because when you have a heavy rain comes down there, there's 5 different entities take water samples every month on this creek right here. So you see how Conservation Commission, EPA, University of Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State University, they all have different ones down here. And then when we started, actually had a family working with Oklahoma State University, it was down this summer when they started having the algae bloom and problems down there on that. They was actually checking the creek twice a day and all that. So,
really?
So you're being watched, and which isn't bad. You know what I'm saying? But I know now, hey, if it's something coming from there, it's not coming from me. It's coming from something, farther upstream or whatever and all that. And so I'm never a proponent on it. I know people laugh at me and all that, but up and down the ditches down around here, after a big rain, wash stuff down, and all of a sudden there'll be a log across there, and you'll see maybe 100 cans and bottles just washed down the deal and all that. And so my deal trying to sell to people is you wouldn't go throw those in the lake. I guess some people would, but most people never ever think about throwing them in the lake. But I took pictures of them, and you show where they'd wash down maybe to a culvert and get stopped up, and there'll be hundreds of them, another one. But then you look back over here in the creek, and there's a log across there, and so it was catching everything. So there was just hundreds of bottles and cans that were down through there and all that. And the next big rain, you know where they're at? They're in Grand Lake. And so my selling point to people is no one would think about throwing them in Grand Lake, but you throw them in a ditch, they're going to end up in the lake and all that. So I'm one of the things I'm trying to work through is with our county commissioners, work with the deal through on some of that part of it, and they're pretty good in working with our conservation districts. And so that's it's just simple things like that, and that's what I try to tell to the group with the Grand Lake watershed. They're thinking just farmers and ranchers. They don't think about all the ditches and everything else, and so there's a lot of things that we can do. It's the little things that are lasting. Okay, the big things cover them up, and they fix things temporarily. It's the little things that are lasting and make the difference, and we all got to learn to do them. And the other people that need us to do them need to respect what we're doing and help doing that. It's a story to tell of what we have, our challenges to do about water quality and helping them, because that's a big thing right now with a lot of things out here. And it's a big challenge to do that. And a lot of people rely on us doing the right things. We need help. They depend on these things. We need help with it. How do we work together? And so that's a challenge to do it. And amazingly, when you think of it, I remember years ago, I went to Washington, D.C. on an OOHRP leadership program, and we were to meet with PETA, okay? And of course, they're like, oh my gosh, you guys, please don't say all the wrong thing. So there's 3 or 4 of us they knew were going to talk and say something. So PETA had if I remember correctly, 4 or 5 people up there, and they all each gave us a talk about what we need to do and what people do wrong about animals and everything else and all. And so got through, and of course we'd been warned so much, we're just sitting on our hands, wasn't going to say anything. So I got through, and they said any questions, and I raised my hand, and I know Pete looked at me like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? So I asked him, he was talking about confinement, different things, how terrible that was. I asked him if he had any dogs or cats. and And they said yes. One of them was, oh, I know where you're going with on that. And I said, well, I haven't even said it. Oh, I know what you're going to say. I said, well, no, I'm just going to ask you a question. Do you let your dogs and cats, are they free range? Can they just go run and do all that? Well, no, but I love my cats and I take care of them and they're taking care of them and all that. I said, that's fine. I'm not blaming you or anything else. We have dogs and cats too and that love them too. But that's how we feel about our animals, their livelihood. And why would we intentionally want to do anything wrong to them and all that? So I know walking out there, they still didn't care about us or whatever, but I made them think about it for a moment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was my whole point on that was, we have just as much desire to take care of them and do that. And I'm sure they see the bad pictures or whatever and all that. But see, we don't do enough of that.
Yeah.
We don't do enough of that. We want to be comfortable. We don't want to go around there people that don't think or act like or talk like or look like us, right? Because that's a comfort deal.
Mm-hmm.
We've drawn those lines for whatever reason we have, and I think we all lose so much by not interacting and learning from them. We don't broaden our horizons. We don't open up our minds and do things like that. And I think so many more things in this world could be accomplished if we just thought that way, we looked that way.
Okay, so on my list of things that you've done conservation-wise for your property, I've got minimum till and no-till.
Yes.
Cropland conversion to grasses.
Yes.
Pond water management.
Yes, ma'am.
Brush and thistle management.
Yes, ma'am.
Riparian areas. There's pecan orchard and then cover crops. What else have I missed?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work, a lot of places on waterways. You work with so many, and I just cutting beans last night and already saw places I knew do it again. You can build new terraces and you do all these great things for all that. But for example, if you have rains and your soil is wet, and then all of a sudden you have that big rain, all the great things that you've tried to do, they're going to blow them out, and that's what's going to happen. That's what happened. So my land, has the right contour to it. I've got terraces or whatever to prevent that, but they won't always hold up, and you have that. And so you finally say, this doesn't need to be in farming ground anymore, or at least this big area needs to be taken out and planted. So we're doing a lot of conversion work. I'm doing a lot of conversion work of cropland into grassland. That's probably my biggest commitment that I have. The water quality deal is a big thing. Working on that. We use the big large tires that will hold 1,000 gallons of water, and we don't. That's the thing I take pride in. I have 2 men that work for me full time. It's a father and a son, and we can't drill the water wells ourselves, but we do everything else. We, because you'll get a 65%, where they'll pay that. Well, I don't have the money to do that, so we do all the labor ourselves to help offset that. So, we've ran, it's probably a close 17, 18 miles of water line, and so we run all of our water lines, and we build all the fences and everything else. And the last time I looked, I'm up to 51 miles of fence, and that's quite you don't think about that. You do not think. I remember there's a new deal came out, a tax deal and something like when my mother passed away and it came with me. And so I brought it up to my accountant. I said, is there something on fencing and all that? He goes, well, I'll check on it. Called me back and he goes, yeah. I need to know how many feet of fence you have. And I said, okay, I'll get back with you. I call him back. I said, we're talking miles. And he goes, okay, how many miles? I told him. He said, I can't believe it. And it is amazing, what you have, but it's a, it's a major thing, especially now at the cost of everything. So
I'm thinking, how did you measure?
Yeah.
How did you measure all
Off
of
of
that?
my maps, my aerial maps,
Okay.
and I can show you booklets I have, but I've got
Okay.
it all in books.
You didn't
and
have to go out and
and,
actually.
and see, because what we've done, I'm a big believer. One of the things I guess I could tell you a little more is cell grazing or plat grazing. I'm a big believer in that part of instead of having 160 acres in one pasture, I'll cross it off and there'll be a 40, 40, a 40, and a 40. And I've done that just about everywhere. I've always believed in that, but water was my limiting factor. But now that I've done these others and I can run a water line, I can run a tank over here and do that. So what do you get out of that? I told you before, I'm a slow learner and all that, but you graze them here and then you move them over to here. And of course the animals love going to a fresher plot, something like that. That's only natural. And you're resting. And that's one of the things my dad always taught me. It's important to fertilize and do your soil test and fertilize and make your pHs correct and everything's right on there and that. But he said the greatest thing you never do to your cropland and everything else, or especially your pastures, is rest. You got to give it rest. Well, we all now, today's time where you got to pinch out everything you can, it's hard to think doing it. But what it allows me to do is to rotate them and you're resting it there and that. But, from all the things that we learned, probably even, not even in college, but even from biology and junior high and high school, how slow learners we are sometimes. But I was doing that, and it's taking a while to come back, but I'd fertilize it good because I can run about a cow to 1 acre when I do that, okay? Well, it took me a long time to realize, and what I should have known that I'd learned as a kid, I would graze it down too far, but I would fertilize it. I'd give it everything it wanted and all that. But that plant could utilize that if it didn't keep its leaf to do the photosynthesis and keep that food chain going and all that. And so I've learned when the grass gets about like that, move them. And it's amazing how much quicker it comes back. And how dumb of me not to even think or realize that. So you learn to rotate and do all that. So that is a big part of it. And water, like I said, was my limiting factor. So now I do that. I was using all Marifount tanks and all that, but now I'm using those big tires, and they're quite a job and quite expensive if you do them right. But they're 1,000-gallon water and that, and to see that clear water in there, I mean, if I had to, I'd take a drink out of it. It's that clear and all that. But to see what the cattle are usually drinking out, and I like to think as humans we're taught about how healthy it is for us to drink more water. I would like to think that animal is going to drink a lot more of that than they would out of a muddy pond or something in there. So that's probably as a big a project as I have in doing all. But I'm about done everywhere. Just about got everything done. I got one more place that I need to do that. It's expensive, but.
So you do a tire, then what do you do to hold it in, the water?
Okay.
On concrete? Do you know, Bill?
Yeah.
I've seen the concrete pad.
Yeah. And you learn from these things. So what you do is we go out there and we scrape it down with a skid loader or with a tractor and a bucket. And you get down to around here is rock or gravel. Okay. Out north town where you don't have any rocks, you get down to clay. So you want to get your topsoil away. And so you go in an area about 40 foot by 40 foot and you square that whole thing off. Okay. And then I put some of the geotextile product down.
Yeah.
Okay. Because out north town where there's no rock, we can go put rock around our troughs and everything else. And you have a muddy, wet year, all of a sudden they're all gone. The cattle are pushing them because there's no rock in there. They just keep pushing them under. So the geotextile helps hold that up there and yet lets moisture go through it. Okay, so moisture go through it. So you use that around there, but you got barren ground. So then you drop this. Well, you've already brought your water line in. okay? And you already got the water line coming up from the ground there. And you also, we put an overflow line. Not everyone does that, but I put an overflow line in there. And so you got it coming up, then you drop this big old tire, probably weighs 2 tons. So, I mean, it is big.
Wow.
But before you've done that, you have to get it all level because you ain't going to lift up that tire and stick something under. So you work really hard to get everything leveled, and you put it on there, and then you go ahead and check again where you got all level and all that. Well, now you got your plumbing coming up through there. Okay, so through that plumbing, you use a stainless steel pipe coming up through there, and then you pour concrete in that center hole, and that seals off the tire. Now that tire has, on the top part, a lot of that cut out, the ring part of it cut off. And so do that. And then everyone, you have the geotextile, so what everyone does is gravel. But I go a 4-foot circle around my tank, and I concrete that also, because that's where the cattle, it's their front feet that are doing the damage, you're doing all. So then I'll concrete around there, and then the rest you fill in about 6 inches of gravel out around there.
Mm-hmm.
They come up there, and now, you know, and that's the trouble with the marrow founts. You know, you got 1 hole, 2 hole, 4 hole, 6 hole, or whatever. But if you watch cattle in the evening, like, they all go to water. They all get a line. They all go to water. Well, now I can have 20 head around the tank at one time instead of having to take turns and crowding up and doing all that. So it's a good deal. It's expensive. The tires are getting harder to come by, especially the bigger ones.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get a semi load out of West Virginia to get all the bigger ones and all that.
Wow.
But it's a neat deal. I was hesitant about it. I did not want to do it. I wanted to have marrow fountain. No wonder where I'm going to do a tire and do all that. And our district secretary Shirley said, I need one as a project so we can have a field day. So I did it. Now I love it now. But now I've probably got 20 some of them like that. And so it's good. There's some places I probably would desire a marrow fountain for smaller deals, but that's they work really good, because if you lose your source of water, at least you got marrow fountain. You're going to have about 100 gallons in there. And here you got 1,000 gallons in the larger ones.
So when it gets really cold, do you have to go break that too, like you'd have to?
Yes, and you can and you may. But what we have on there is also, it's a float valve. Obviously, keeps the water on there. And it's either coming off of rural water or it's coming off of well water. Okay? But you also have an extra line in there, a cock valve on the end of it. And then you block the end off and drill a little hole in there, and you open it up, and it'll spray a stream of water out, okay? And so that little hose is laying down in there. So I almost do it all. You know, if you remember when I first told you here, I bring an overflow pipe up through there, and then you take it out and you do it kind of like you would a sewage deal, build a rock or whatever, so you can get the water away from you. Now that's a hard thing to do. You can't do it everywhere, but you try to get that out. But I will keep that going in the winter time, and we got down to 20 something below here, and the ones I turned the cock valve on, none of them froze. Some of them I didn't, and they did. But people tell you can run up your truck or tractor and hit it and it'll break it up. But anywhere where I had those cock valves going, doing. But I also like it in the summertime because it keeps it cooler.
Yeah.
Keeps the water cooler for those animals doing that. So that keeps that just, you can't see it circulating, but it keeps it moving enough that it won't freeze. But you don't want it overflowing where they're standing naturally. So you have an overflow pipe. It's like a 3-inch pipe, and you run it off somewhere. And like I said, some of them work real good, and some of them, where I got clay around, it saturates and overflow stops there and all that. But it's a good thing, you know. And I wasn't a believer in it, and I did it because I was told to do it, and I did it, and I like it, and we have a lot of people come look at it. You know, it's funny. Sometimes if we just open up our mind, we already know what's best, so we know what to do in that. And I found out that I don't know much, and I need to learn it, so I enjoy that part of it. But the water quality of that part of it has been through NRCS. Most of the programs I've had, you know, I've done the spray in the pastures and doing that, but I've always been on top of that pretty much, but I have used those programs. We don't have the cedar problems here, but the water quality deals is the biggest thing for me in that.
Yeah.
And I obviously couldn't have done them without, I had an EQIP program years ago, and I had 260 acres, and I always wanted to divide that all up. And I never could do it. I had a creek and one pond, but I could never really divide it all up and everything. And I'll be honest with you, there's times a year the creek was not a water source. It just, whatever pockets of water there, it's not what you really want in that. So everything walked all the way through that 260 acres to the pond to get water. And if it got too low, then you didn't have anything in there. So I got an EQIP program and got a well drilled down there and started putting tanks around it. Back that time we used all mirror fountains, and I was happy to have that. That changed everything. And so then we started doing that everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big investment. It's a big investment, but it's sort of it's the way to go, and where you can control more narratives on it. Because I do not like ponds. I mean, I'm getting rid of. I'll keep some ponds, and they're for wildlife and for grandkids fishing. It's the only ways I keep them, because to me, with our type of soils, it's not a practical thing. If I had rockier soils or whatever and all that, it would be good. But around here, it's just a sediment problem, and you don't, it's murky. It's not very well. So what ones I'm keeping, I'm fencing off, and it's more for wildlife, ducks, geese, and fish, and stocking it for that. But it's that's been my biggest projects that I've had, is the water part of it, and it's amazed me how much difference it can make for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But
What do you think your dad would think about the place today?
oh, I'd love to come back, because there's some things to say. I know, when I first started in the Riparian area and I moved cattle out, I could see my dad saying, "What are you doing?" And that's and my grandfather and great grandfather say, "Well, dadgummit, that's why we settled here. that's why we have what we had here." I know they can see it, but I know from their thinking, if they would have known how everything has changed in this country and in this world, and the quality and everything else and all that, I think they'd be really proud of it. I really do. But I'm sure that wasn't even in their foggiest idea and all that.
Well, it wasn't in yours in high school days either.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. When I first saw that program, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And so, I'll be honest with you, now that I've done the riparian area of that and done that, I've now neighbors and all that, they're liking it. The only thing I don't like, because usually you keep it so clean and pretty down around the creek and everything. Now you're letting it grow up, and it's weeds, and you're doing all the nature stuff you're supposed to be doing, but it sure isn't pretty seeing all that. And I've got one neighbor, and he said, "Man, I just all the years worked so hard to keep those things away, and now we're going to let trees. Now they'll let us go in there and spray thorn trees that come up, or thistles or whatever, but the other stuff, we got to let it come along, and it's maybe not the prettiest sight that you'd see, but the only ones who complain to me now is the cows, and that what we took away and all that. But that's one of the things I talk about. They talk about with climate change and everything, how it's affecting everyone that lives around the East Coast and the West Coast. That's what this guy's talking about, with the water levels coming up and it's forcing them back. I said, "You think they're mad? Come talk to my cows." We made them all get away from the creek. But, and I know it's far-fetched, but no. Sometimes we got to think that maybe that's things that we're going to have to do, or whatever. And things are going to change. I know we can make differences in what's happening, but we can't change Mother Nature and what it's going to do. We never have, and if you try to push back at it, number one, it's going to be very expensive, and number two, it's not going to be lasting.
Yeah,
it'll overcome it. and but we can try all the things doing that. But I'm grateful because I couldn't have, without equip programs and all the others, I could have done what I wanted. I mean, I had a plan here that I wanted to get to here, but I knew I wasn't going to live to there. But the programs just allowed me to condense it down, allowed me to do all of them, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I think that I've been guilty of in the past, and I think what maybe 90% of us farmers and ranchers don't look at. We look at programs like the equip or whatever, and they'll say, well, they're going to pay 60% or whatever. And the only way I can afford to do it is I try to do as much of labor as I can. I don't have someone come and build the fences. We do all that part of it, do everything else and that. And a lot of them do, and some of them don't. And so they look at it and they'll say, well, I'm not going to make no money off of this. Mm-hmm. Well, no, probably not. You got to look at the value you're putting in there. But that's a hard selling point for them. But one of the biggest things is when I did all this creek area and all that, one of the stipulations I had to do with GRDA was I had to have a land description. Well, I'm good at writing up land description, but you can't do it when you're going that. Yeah. So I had to have a surveyor come in, and it was $8,000 for him to survey all this area where we went around there, and I had to pay that. Government didn't pay that. GRDA didn't pay that. I had to pay that part of it. And so what I opened mine to is what we have from our conservation districts when they come out there and they help us shoot things. They're not survey, but all the things we take that for granted. The technical assistance that they can provide is by far the best value that we're getting out of. But we want to think about, they're going to pay me so much for my fence and so much for this, that, and the other. But we don't realize the value and the technical assistance that we're getting from. And it took something like paint a survey, and I thought, my goodness. And I thought, wow, think about all the times I've asked them to come out and shoot this and other because I want drainage and all that. And I'm thinking, you know what, that's what a lot of us, including myself, in the past have taken for granted. And I try not to do that anymore because that's an important thing on that. So this operation could be anything what it is without the conservation districts and the people doing it. It wouldn't happen. So when I win an award, it's a we award. They'll come to me and they say, we put you in. I've never put in for any of these. And they come put me in for it, and I'm like, I just got through doing this. And people say, I saw you in the newspaper and things like that. But they made a good point. And they said, no, this is about us too, and you're helping sell these things and all that. Yeah. And so that's the way I look at that. And that is the truth. They didn't know anything about me. I mean, when someone say, you do all these great things, I said, I'm just smart enough to humble myself to allow other people to be involved. Because I couldn't do that. And so that's what I want. I want the Ottawa County Conservation District. I want to be, that's the winner. And that's a part of it. And we can think of all the guys that's on there, and then we got a secretary there that pushes us hard to do all those things. Wouldn't for her, those things wouldn't happen. A lot of these things wouldn't happen without Sarah doing that, and that's good. You need to be challenged. She'll say, you need to be on this and need to do that, and I'll say, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. She had me talking to people that I'm not comfortable with. Not comfortable with at all. She said, go tell them your story. And I've sat in here with my laptop and computer and that, and there's one of them that's a White House counsel one, working with people of differing origin, different things like that. And so she had me get on there and watch those and that. So I get on there and I immediately turn me off camera, but I look and I know I look like a white person, part white, part Spanish, but I'm the only one. All the others were people of color and all that. And finally, one gentleman spoke up, and he was probably 70s or 80s, and he said, shame on us. He said, I'm here looking at all. He said, all you people look just like me. We're not doing any good. We need to be all of different. He said, shame on us saying we're trying to make a difference and being different. He said, he said, you all look just like me. He said, that's not good. And I thought, yeah, he's right about that.
Yeah.
And, but also think it's the same way. And that's why I've told you in my district, I want to be more open-minded to other people. But I got a selfish reason for it because I learned from them. That's it. That's my selfish side of it. Is you pick up new ideas and you learn from them. You don't agree with everything. Hey, my wife and I don't agree with everything. We've been married 42 years, so that's probably not going to change either in the next years. But that's okay, and it's okay to differ in opinion, but to take a hard stance and not do it. So I'm excited about what these awards have done there. It's opened up doors for me to go talk. I'm a lot of mentoring programs and all that. And I thought, oh man, how am I going to mentor someone, doing all that? But I'm excited about that. I was on the school board and we had a young teacher or a young coach or a young VOAG teacher, whatever, and they were on fire about doing that. I didn't want that fire to go out because you think, that's going to go away. Not going to be like. I want people like that. I want people with a passion. Like I'm going to make a difference and do things. And our way of doing it is okay. That ain't going to last long. You're going to get around here, and that's all going. I don't want that to happen. And I love someone that's if it's someone at a restaurant that's waiting on me. If it's somewhere I go buy my fertilizer from, it's somewhere I buy my parts from. I want to feel wanted. I want someone to really want to do that. It's a lost cause that we have a lot of places, all that. And I want people with passion. Mm-hmm. Passion doesn't cover everything. Still got to be smart. Still got to be responsible and have everything else. But man, if you don't have your heart into it, that's what I try to teach my boys. I ask them, time in life that I say, okay, what are you going to do in life? What do you want to be in that? Oh, I don't know. I may want to do this. I may want to do that. I told them, I said, you know what? You better get a job that will pay for your lifestyle. Because if not, you're always going to be in trouble. Okay? Never going to be. But I said, don't let your ego get in the way and get in a position to make a lot of money and something that's really stressful and whatever and all that. Because I said, you got to love what you're doing. That's got to be your first thing. You might not, they call it a job for a reason. They don't call it fun. But you still got to enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're going to be miserable. It's going to affect your health. It's going to affect your marriage. It's going to affect your children. It's going to affect a lot of things in your life. And you have to enjoy. You got to be able to fall back on it. Well, I don't like dealing with this person, or I don't even like my boss, but man, I love what I'm doing. Okay. But if you don't have that, it's a paycheck, and that's not healthy. I don't care what kind of money you're making. It's not worth that. And I think that is the biggest lesson. And I think fortunately, I'll hear them come home and they'll complain about this, that, and the other. And I said, when you get really, really upset with it, take that check and look at that check and say, oh, it's okay, But it's important. I think people sometimes I think are so miserable about what they're doing, and I think, man, you need to try something else. You need to do something else and all that. But
they need to come ride the combine with you for a day or two.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's why I always told them. I said, come out here for a while. That's why I said when I left, I thought, there ain't no way where I'm ever come back. I said, see you later. I got Stillwater, and no one told me what time to go to bed. No one told me that I couldn't go out and eat. I mean, because, at home, you rarely went to a restaurant, you did that. I go wherever I want to eat. I could eat whenever I wanted to be. I did all that. But after about a month or two of that, I'm like, I wonder what fried chicken really tastes like again, or what a good roast, or and my boys are all the same way. I knew they couldn't wait to get away, and then got back, and they missed that part of it. And I think that's part of it. It's one of those other things is you got to lead by example, not by what you're telling. And I think that's the greatest thing, a lesson for all. We can talk about it with our kids, but I mean, that's life. That's what I'm trying to do on these conservation deals. I'm out there telling people, and people like me. We get along good and everything else. But I know they're listening to me because I'm out supposed to be talking about that. But now that they start seeing some of it, they'll say, I'm going to drive by and look at that. Anytime you want to go do that, that's part of it. I'm wanting to look at it. And I said, well, they'll say, well, I think I might be interested in that. And I said, then we'll get you hooked up. And so we're doing that. But we have a challenge because on the Horse Creek part of it, it's a bunch of families like mine that go way back. None of them go back as far as what we do, but, still several generations. And we just like 2 or 3 more families, and we'll have the whole Horse Creek area done through there. We're working on them. We'll get it done. And I got more I'd like to do too. I just found out it's a thing to do. And
so you can't retire anytime soon.
No, I'd be miserable. I like I say, I buy some more land from family and do this. And so a really good friend of mine, and he gives me a hard time because he's an OU graduate. So we chatter back and forth about OU, OSU, and everything. But he's a lawyer, but that's all he deals with is, land transactions and all this and all that. He goes, you drive up in an old Dodge pickup. He said, look what I drive out there. I don't even know what it is, but I know it's high dollar. And he said, you could buy a bunch of them. He said, go sell your land and go down and live on the lake. I said, what am I going to do? That's a sad thing. Now, do I want to get away a little more from the mechanical farming part of it? Yes, but I wouldn't be happy doing anything else. I really wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, that's a story a lot of people say, oh, I wouldn't be happier doing all that. Yeah, I get up some days and I think, oh, I got to work cattle today. I can't climb over that corral like I used to, and I can't do those things. I'll do it. I wouldn't change any of that for anything. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes there's just so much going, and you're like, oh, how am I going to do it? And then when you get caught up on things, you kind of wish you had a little bit of challenge. You wish you had a little more of that. And then I get on more boards and I get on more things on that, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
So how do you turn your mind off at night?
I don't.
That's right.
I don't.
I didn't think you did.
If I'm by myself or if someone's in with me, I'm driving to Stillwater. I do an awful lot, or going, wherever I'm going. I never turn a radio. I'm out there for 12 hours on the combine or tractor. I'll have radio on. I'm thinking.
You're thinking about stuff.
I got my church stuff. I got my family stuff. I got the kids. Got conservation. I got to get this done. I got that done. It's me driving. My wife said, well, I hate it. You got to drive there by yourself. I said, no, that's good for me. It's the only time. You have your phone, but you sit there and do that. But
out on the tractor, you take a wrong turn and end up in the creek.
Yes.
If you're thinking too much.
Well, and it's hard for me to think like I used to think about when I was young, because I thought for all the other reasons, about things like that. But as I got older, and I don't know when that changed, because even when my dad was alive, we bumped heads. I mean, just different ideas, different generations and all that. I mean, and I had to think about this a while back because I never could understand. Dad, we would always slower getting everything done because we didn't have the fancy equipment and everything else. So everyone else was done combining when we was done combining, and you wanted to hurry and get your combine done if it was wheat so you could get soybeans planted. But if you waited too late, it got too hot, too dry, you couldn't do it. So we was always pressed to have to do that. And I never will forget, and we always have kids working from us from school. We'd always have, and we'd be out there and we're just about done with everything, harvesting, and it'd be 4 o'clock, and Dad'd say, okay, let's go in and go get the lawnmowers. So we go get the lawnmowers because there's all push lawnmowers, and we go uptown and go mow. All the widow ladies from the church go mow their yards, rake the leaves and do all that over there. And I'd always think, are we doing this?
Yeah.
We need to be out there doing that. And I'd never say anything to my dad, though. You know, I was in fear of him, but, you know, I just never said anything. And one day when we was going through, this is the 70s and things were really, really tough, I remember looking at Dad and I said, Dad, we can't afford to do this. We need to be out there cutting the wheat so we get beans planted. And then I stopped and like, oh my gosh, you know, the rat's coming through on that. And he looked at me and he said, we can't afford not to do this. I'm like, okay, whatever, rolled my eyes and all that. Years later, that finally came to me. Those things are far more important than what we did. What was another day doing that? But you see, that's the way I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't happen. Then I realized it. It was probably 10 years after my dad was gone. It finally dawned on me what he meant. There's things in life you can't afford not to do, you know, instead of doing that. Because he didn't look at everything with that, you know, the money thought or whatever and all that. But that's lessons for me. Mm-hmm. And I only wish I understood those more back when he was alive, you know. And perhaps he was probably the same way with his. And I think my boys are like that. They don't understand why I still live over a house and do this. Promise my wife I'm going to build her a new house. See, this house was built before there was running water or anything, so all that had to be added later. So all the bedrooms are upstairs, and there's a restroom downstairs, but the only bathroom is upstairs. And there's these steps and there's other steps. As we get older, one day that's going to be quite a deal and all that. And I always tell them to do it, but then I buy some more cows or do some other than that. But you know what? And none of this would happen. And forgive me for being this way, you know, but to have a spouse that believes in what you're doing. Now, she's not always happy with that. I thought we was going to spend this money on a house, or I thought we was going to do this, that, the other, and that. But behind me, 110%. That's because, you know, she grew up with 4 siblings and in a 2-bedroom house, you know. Yeah. So all those other things never were that important to her and all that. And I couldn't do what I've done without that. Wouldn't have happened. She'd been long gone.
And she asked you out first.
Pardon? She asked me out first. Yeah, that's the story of that. But it's a neat story, and it's neat how my aunt went that way, and then how she came back here, and it's a neat story, and she loves her teaching because I don't know how she has the patience to work with some of the kids, because she comes home and tells them the stories about the ones you know, that have needs and all that. And and they get better, and then you have Christmas break and you come back and they've regressed all the way back, and you just do it. And she said, no one else will do it. Their parents won't do it. No one else will do it. But we can't walk into any convenience store, any Walmart, about anything. Mrs. Victor, you know, they all know. But there's a place for them in society. And then some of them, my mom's in the hospital, and the head nurse on that floor was one of her. So see, some of them have really risen doing all that. But she, like my passion for conservation, her passion is for those that don't have a voice. Yeah. You know, that's her thing. So that's probably a lot better calling than what I have.
Well, both of you share the patience. You have patience for the land, and she has patience for the.
That's all right. The only way she can deal with me, the fact that she works. But you see, it takes all of that, and I know I have other family members don't understand. You know, why don't you sell that? Why do you do that to yourself? And I'm like, this is awesome stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Now, I mean, it is. And you talk about it, and you say there's so many unknowns you can't control. You can't control the weather. You can't control this, doing all that. Probably what makes it more interesting, you know, the weather change. It probably would not be a fun thing if it was all a perfect thing. And I think that's why it's intriguing to us. And always realizing, because Mother Nature will whip you back around that you aren't smarter than her. She will always teach you those lessons. You know, you've got this figured out, and this is the way to do it, and you know what you're doing. Things change.
Yeah.
You have to learn to change with it, because if you don't, you'll get left behind, you know. And that's my biggest things is just learning to adapt, whether you like it or not. I don't like change. I'm like, oh my goodness, now we got to start doing this, we got to do that way, whatever. I don't really like it, but that's what it is. I mean, you do, or you get left behind. That part of it, and then also understanding that Mother Nature can heal and fix things on their own so much quicker than what we can if we just get away from it and let it do it. And that's been my biggest lesson. That's the biggest things that I try to sell to other people, doing that. And you have to be humble in it. Anything and everything that's ever been a part of me is because I've had other people helping me.
Yeah.
And I try to never lose track of that part of it, because it wouldn't be my family, you know, I mean, my great grandfather, you know, I'm sure there were some times that it wasn't really pleasant or good. You know, I'm sure it was hard for my grandfather to keep things there. I know how hard it was for my dad, because we're through it, and it's like, I mean, what are you going to do, you know? And my kids see that, and I want them to understand that it's a blessing. It is a blessing. You can make it something worse if you want to make it worse, but it is a blessing, you know. So,
Well, it's a blessing for those of us who don't do this too. I mean, we wouldn't have food on the table without guys like
well,
you, right?
my desire is, in my time that I have left, is to reach out to other people and do that. And we talked about the Blue Thumb deal where we had the training session, and they came in, and here I'm thinking I'm doing everyone else a favor. And I came out that day, and I know when I got through, you know, I told my wife, it was actually held in the morning at the VOTEC where she teaches. And you got home, she goes, oh, how terrible, how bad was it for you? And I said, I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. She goes, boy, that's not what you sound like last night before you went into that. So, you know, it was good for me. It was healthy in doing that. You know, other people have passions too. They have other responsibilities or other areas, and so we need to share them. I need to share with people from the city, you know, what my challenges are and what it is for me to make these things, you know, that, and they need to hear that, and I need to hear what they're saying. And the key to the whole thing is the education. That is the whole key to it. And not educating our group, okay? Bringing those others out here and seeing how much fun they have being out here. I thought, man, that's awesome to see someone enjoying doing it. And then being able to start telling me what they're finding, what they're seeing. I go, are you kidding me? I didn't know that was there, you know.
Right.
And one of the other neat things that all the things that my grandfather and my dad passed down and told me about, I didn't know. But before I started the RPG program, was they had to send out a person to make sure that we wasn't going to mess with anything of historical deal on that. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you ain't going to find out, don't you? Well, I don't know that. And then he comes back and he brings me, he started telling me, he goes, well, you know, there's actually an archaeological dig on your place down here, back in the other. And he said, he started telling me about the story. He said, yeah, the Smithsonian people came in on a train at the Afton depot, and they came out here in 1902. He starts telling me all that. He goes, hey, I'll get your copy of all that. And I have it in there, and it's about that thick. And it shows the things they found. But the neat thing, it shows the guys, they've dug a deep hole, and they're down there, and they're standing there for a picture. And behind them is, and we're talking about right down there by the creek now, there's nothing out there but prairie grass. Wow. Nothing. There wasn't a tree in the background. Show them from a different area everywhere you look, and that's all trees down there. And that. So that just shows you how much that's changed there and all that.
Years, yeah.
And showing all artifacts that they found, arrowheads. I mean, you're talking about those type of things, but also finding dinosaur bones and everything else and all that. And I just thought that was, I just thought that was so neat. And I suppose my father didn't know that. I don't know. I'm sure he would have told me about that.
Mhm.
I know a place or two out north of town that he told me that they had some digs out there on some land that we rented, not land that we owned. But he didn't know about this.
Wow.
But it's so neat, you know.
Yeah.
So wow, what a lesson there,
Mhm.
you know. And the history going back, and you know, my great grandfather is an orphan, and his opportunity to be around here, his best buddies was like the Colemans, like the Coleman Theater had there,
Mhm.
and there, they got into buying all the land up for all the mining deal, and that's how they made their million.
Wow.
And so he was buying other farmland around and all that when he was doing all that. And but someone that grew up, and then was a U.S. Marshal, but someone growing up that was an orphan, and that's just kind of neat.
It
And
is.
then the story about his wife Delilah, and learning how that all happened. That's fascinating to me. And so it's stories that you have to tell and show that I have to share with my kids and all that. And I think in life, when we're given things, we have a responsibility of sharing those things and sharing those stories and doing that. And I think that's a big responsibility that I carry. I really think it is. You know, when you go help someone, someone say, "Oh, you don't need to give them that." I don't think I could ever, in my lifetime, I could ever give back enough for what I've been given. And that's the way I try to live my life.
Right.
I could never get back for what I've been given, and I strongly feel that way. And it's if I go give I try to teach the difference to, used to teach it when I was teaching classes, but now it's with my grandkids. I try to teach them. They'll say, "Oh, we're going to go to school, we're going to exchange gifts, we're going to do that." I said, "No, you're exchanging presents." No, we're exchanging gifts, Papa. And I said, "No, you're not." There's a difference in life. I want them a difference. If I give someone a gift, I give them something without any expectation that I'm going to receive it back. But today, everything in life is a present. I'm going to give you something because I know what you're going to give me.
Mhm.
And when you're young, you're always thinking, "Well, I'm going to give this someone. I know what they're going to give me." And as you get older, you're thinking, "Man, what can I give them? Be better than what they're going to give me." It's how it all changes and all that. But the neatest thing is to be able to go do and give or share or help someone that you don't know or you'll never see. Mm-hmm. So you go open the door for someone you didn't know because you know them, or you know some of the family, someone you don't know, or you go help someone, you give them money to do, but you go do it for someone you don't know. That's a gift.
Yeah.
That's a gift. And that's something that's important to me. I get people mad at me. They'll say, "You go give them money, you don't know what they're going to do with it." And I said, "No, I don't. I have no idea. Not my decision, But I just believe that comes back. But and some people say, "Oh, you don't need to help me." And I said, "No, you're taking away my ability to give you a gift." And that's what I want to do. But we think in so many terms that I give to you and you give to me and we share. We're not gifting to anything. We're just it's just presents back and forth. So when it's a gift, you give something you have no expectation anyone do. And I'm out here at Buffalo Ranch all the time out there, and you won't believe the people that come up and they got a problem. And, they had a breakdown, they need money and all that. And they'll say, my wife goes, "I know what you're going to do. You're going to go up and do it." But, it's what you do. You know what I'm saying? And it's a fun thing for me. It really is. And, but life lessons, and it's a shame we have to go so deep into our life to really appreciate the things that make a difference. Isn't that a shame? And it's the same things I talk about now that I remember my dad and my grandparents talking about. But why does it take years for us to do that? I don't know. And then in this world now, I don't know how many, some of them ever realized it, So
that's the gift of time. I think sometimes that's the biggest
that
thing.
is, and we're all for a reason or whatever and all that. But I'm grateful for you all coming out doing this. I just hope there's something somewhere or somehow that it means something to somebody.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your story and stories with us. This has been great.
Yes.
So, I believe Tanya has one last question that you always ask.
I always ask, how do you want to be remembered?
Well, uh, I want to be known as a giver, not a taker. That I don't. I'm real adamant about that. That I don't let that get out of balance, because that means a lot to me. And I'm not talking about money or anything else. I want to know that I'm giving more back into soil and things and all that than what I'm taking and doing all that. I just want to do that. Not that it wasn't of intellect or anything else, but it was always my passion to be more of a giver than a receiver.
Yeah.
And that's important to me. That's why I want to be known. And I didn't give for any other reason other than being that's what I need to do. And that's what I want to be known as. And that can be looked at in a lot of ways, and not as a braggart in any way, because I can't give as much as what I have. I mean, look what I have. There's no bags of money to walk away when it's on that. But I have been blessed with having the opportunities. They haven't all been easy, and some of them have been a fight. But I just want people to know that do more things by let people see you by what you do and not what you say. And that's a tough one. And one of the scriptures that scares me to death more than anything, judge not lest you be judged. I worry about that. I don't want to judge people. I don't agree with what they may say, or I don't agree with what they do, but I don't know what their background is either. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they've been through. Okay. And so that's a big one, and I am so grateful for my generations to allow me to have the opportunities I have today. And I hope my kids and grandkids will know that one day. And I think they do. I mean, I know they do, but it'll sink into them really. More so with my oldest son now. The others, yeah, they like it and agree and all that. But I want them to understand, it wasn't me, it was my dad. It was all the way down the line, do that. And to also realize that not everyone's had that. Not everyone's had that. You sat on the school board and you sat on there, hey, people say, we need to get rid of those kids. I mean, they're going to act and do things like that. We just need to get rid of them. And I'd say, well, what are they going to do? And I said, my biggest thing in dealing with youth and that part of it, doing that, they know, they'd say, well, they know right from wrong. They know right from wrong. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, they do. But there's two rights and wrongs. There's right and wrong by the law, and there's right and wrong with morally. Okay? They know when they come home from school that mom and dad are smoking pot or doing drugs or doing whatever, and they know that that's wrong by the law, and you better not get caught, right? But they don't know that it's wrong. They just know it's wrong if you get caught doing that. You see what I'm saying? And so that's the hardest thing to teach. And you can't teach that in your school system other than maybe they buy into a teacher or someone else that they see there, and they want to get out of that and doing that. But that's got to be one of the toughest things when you see families. Okay, look how I've been blessed because families pass everything down to me doing that. But families having the opposite of that never have anything and always dependent and no drive or desire to get out of that systematic whatever and all that, that'd be miserable. Mm-hmm. That'd be miserable. And money doesn't fix that problem. It goes a lot deeper than all that. There's a lot of other things. And I feel for that. I mean, that's a tough thing. I don't know. I mean, I know why people think differently. You know, if you live in that background and you've had that, I can't answer for them. All I know is that we got to help get them out of that system, or nothing will ever change. And but no, that's the biggest thing is I want to be known that giver, and I feel like a lot of my life I've been a taker, so I want to be a giver. That's what I want to be.
Well, you've given us a lot today, so and we thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Well,
You were great.
thank you for your patience with me.
Sure.
You're welcome.